Hi, I'm Lori K. Coleman. Welcome to the Empowering Transformation Series, How to Reduce Stress and Release Trauma, Experience a Peaceful Mind, and Have the Power to Move Forward. I'm so thankful you are here. I'm doing this series to help people learn tools to make it through the challenging times that we are in. And I am excited to bring you today Dr. Evan Van Driel. Dr. Evan is a naturopath physician specializing in treatment of trauma, mood disorders, and chronic pain. He graduated from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in 2014 with a doctorate of naturopathic medicine and has since pursued postgraduate studies in neuro-emotional technique, mesophysiology, psychoneuroimmunology, I do know how to say that word, and regenerative medicine, including certification from the Internal College of Applied Kinesiology and multiple certifications in injection techniques and the application of ozone. He feels blessed to have found a profession that he enjoys and a passion for. Now he shares what he has learned with others to build them up so they can live without symptoms and enjoy the activities that they love. Dr. Evan's mission is to help people to be stronger so they can handle more. By helping people to reduce pain, improve their mood, and rewire their brains after trauma, Dr. Evan has noticed that people can be more themselves and show up differently in life. He sees the nervous system as innately intelligent, adaptable, and having a high degree of plasticity. Being able to leverage his knowledge of this fact structurally, biochemically, and mentally emotionally means that what people experience does not always have to be what they experience. Dr. Evan, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Lori K.
Oh, yes, I'm happy to serve in this way. I felt like I ought to. Let's begin by you explaining how trauma creates interference in the nervous system.
Sure, yeah. So I guess the way that I see it is that when there's I guess our brains encode memory by the amount of emotion, or due to the amount of emotion that's going on in the circumstance that we find ourselves in. So when you ask somebody what they had for breakfast, like last week on Tuesday, they might not know unless it's the same thing every Tuesday. But if you ask people where they were when something like 9/11 happened, a lot of people can snap back right into that moment and remember exactly where they were, who they were with. And so this is kind of how memory works. Like the more significant emotionally a situation is, the more likely we are to remember it. And this happens on the positive side, but also on the negative side. So yeah, so this is how trauma gets wired. It's due to emotion. And um, so yeah, I guess when a negative event happens, it can create a neuro-emotional complex, I guess is one way to call it, a complex. But basically what that is that there's some kind of trigger that evokes that same physiological emotional state.
And you believe that there is a definitely physiological aspect happening because of that emotional state.
Exactly, yeah. And it's hard to say whether it's the physical state that evokes the emotion, the physiological state, or if it's the emotion that evokes the physiological response, or if they're so intertwined and together, like they happen so uh, seamlessly together that it's hard to know which one came first. But either way, we know that they both happen when people are triggered. So so yeah, so we can use that fact, the fact that emotional responses do come along with the physiological response to clear out those trigger slash response relationships so that people don't have to respond with that same emotion every time they run into that trigger. So
Nice, yeah. So regardless of which one comes first, you can be dealing with the emotional aspect and then have the physiological side change for you.
yeah, that's what I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So I know with you, you love so many different things and you specialize in so many different things. And I know you love the gut-brain connection, and I have another doctor that will be talking about that. And you love to talk about mitochondrial function and the powerhouse of our cells and having the energy there. Um, but what I would like us to focus on is how let's have you talk about first, oh, what was it? You were talking about interference fields. Talk to us about that. We can learn that specific thing, and then I want us to dive more into the emotional aspect, because that is something unique about you as a naturopathic doctor, that you really dive into that. And so after we talk about the interference fields, we'll dive into this other topic.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So I guess the basic idea behind interference is that we, I guess our brain has a certain amount of bandwidth, so to speak. So say, like if we're thinking about the amount of download and upload speed, like that, it's kind of a simplistic way of looking at it, but um, the more bandwidth we have, the more information we can process, and the more we can respond to our environment. So like thinking about it in like an internet terminology kind of way. So interference basically reduces our bandwidth. So so that we have less ability to respond to our environment, to sense our environment, ultimately respond to it, and then yeah, and I guess sense our environment, integrate that, and then produce a response that's good for ourselves and the people around us. So so interference basically is anything that throws smoke into the nervous system, that is a mismatch between the brain's map of the body and the body, what's actually going on in the body. Um, and so I guess interference can take multiple forms. One really common form of interference is a scar, and it doesn't matter whether it happened during trauma or some kind of like a traumatic event or a surgery, like it was planned. Um, Basically, when you cut through the tissue, especially the fascial tissue, it seems like that fascia is brings in more sensory input than other types of tissue, even muscle, bone, skin. So that it seems neurologically more important when fascia is disrupted. So kind of like deeper scars, I guess, definitely cut through the fascia if they're going all the way through the layers into the body cavity, for example. So when you
Some of
disrupt
our
that fascia,
audience might not know what fascia is. I look at it as that sticky stuff between the skin of a chicken and the meat of the chicken. It's this, it's just, it's everywhere. It's very much connected. I don't know if they need to know what fascia means or not, but.
no, that's a good point. Exactly. Yeah. And that is what the fascia is. The way that I see it is that it's kind of like the saran wrap around a piece of meat. It's kind of like that, like it's not made out of plastic, it's made out of connective tissue, kind of like it's made out of collagen, kind of like ligaments and tendons are, but it's very much thinner, but it's very highly innervated. And so basically, I guess the brain gets a message about a muscle, for example, about the length of that muscle and hence your body position. So like your brain knows whether your arm's here or here, partially based on how much stretch there is in the fascia and how much slack there is in the fascia, vice versa, and
Mhm.
how tense a muscle is. And so if there's a scar in that fascia, or scar that's cut through that fascia, um, then the brain doesn't exactly know what the length of that fascia is versus the muscle, and so those two pieces of information that are coming from the muscle and from the fascia don't match up, and then it takes up processing power, I guess, to reconcile that difference. Honestly, it's I think it's something like 70% of what our brains have to process is proprioceptive input from our body. So we think about our senses being like our ability to see, smell, taste, touch. But there's also this sense of like where we are in space and how we relate to the objects around us, and that is where the body spends most of its processing power. Like
That's so
to
interesting, Dr. Evan, because in the time that we're in, there's a lot of outside stress going on. And so if there's something that we can do inside of ourselves to make it, have our brains not be so overwhelmed by the 70% of what's going on. Sorry, I thought I turned my phone off. And um, that is so important. It's something that they can actually do to make it be different.
Yeah, exactly. And so say you have one scar on your bicep, and you have one that was they took out your gallbladder, and then you have another one where you tore a tendon in your ankle. Like it's not like any of these individual issues are enough to topple your nervous system and cause you to break down. But in my experience, all of these things add up. They all end up taking up space and your ability to process that input that's coming in. And then I mean, we don't have to talk about all these things, but then plus the stress from your diet, GI inflammation, you're not sleeping well, you don't, you know, you're at odds with somebody at work. All this stuff on top of this interference is what causes people to start decompensating. So I think you're right. If we can reduce the internal interference, or at least the interference that's coming from our own bodies, and take responsibility for that, then I think we have more ability to handle what's going on around us. Um,
Yeah, I love how you look at it as a bandwidth thing. It's like you can only deal with so much.
right.
Do you
And I think
think
we've gotten
that,
to the point, yeah,
I'll say
sorry.
that one more time.
I think we all gotten to that point where we were just like, there's, if one more thing got piled on top of me, I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
So if we have less internal stress, we have more. I don't know. Not to say that you should get to that point where you're toppling over all the time, but um, part of it's internal, and people don't necessarily realize it, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think our bandwidth can increase through having times of stillness or meditation, or just being, you know, having a break from computers or whatever, you know, does that increase our bandwidth?
Yes, that's a good question. I've never. I think there are things that we do that reduce our bandwidth, or certain situation states that reduce our bandwidth, and there are certain things that we can do to improve it. I guess I think, yeah. I guess the other way I kind of think of it is kind of like a bucket, and like once gets to a certain point, it starts overflowing. So we can either, like, we can do things to scoop water out of the bucket. We can just not pour things into the bucket. Um, yeah, we can. So there's different ways to do it. I think I think breathing. Now that you're saying this, breathing is one where we can definitely improve our bandwidth, because if we're oxygenating our cells, they're be able to produce more energy, and that's we can definitely do it.
Now, I was looking at your free gift, which I'm so excited that you're offering to the audience, and you talk about different ways to nourish your body, which is just all free. And it's just, you know, but the breathing is in there, and the importance of just being able to be well hydrated, and the reason behind that and how that helps. But before I get too down crazy paths, I would like you to talk about how they can take care of these scar tissues, because it's super, super simple, and it's just an over-the-counter product.
Yeah, one of the quickest, or one of the best ways that I've seen to deal with scar tissue is using castor oil. And so a lot of people know castor oil is like as a laxative. Um, so that's one way to use it for sure. You can take a shot, an ounce of castor oil, and um, it'll get your bowels moving for sure. But the other way you can use castor oil is using it topically, either in a pack, um, in the form of a pack, or just massaging it into a scar. So usually what I have people do if they have a particularly gnarly scar is to have them massage the castor oil into it and kind of spread the tissue, kind of, I know it sounds like kind of aggressive, but kind of disrupt it, rip it up almost, to kind of, because people, if you run your hand over a scar and if you can feel it in any way, then it's causing interference as far as I'm concerned. So you should be able to kind of run your hand over it. It shouldn't necessarily feel like there's a lump underneath it, or if there's like a certain way that you pull it that creates tension or pain, or creates like a zinging electrical feeling. If any of that's going on, then that's a scar that's creating interference. So what you can do is kind of use your fingers to kind of pull those collagen fibers that are all attached together in like a non-linear and dysfunctional way. You can pull those apart. You can kind of physically manipulate the scar to reduce the size of it. And the cool thing about castor oil is that it improves blood flow to the area, improves lymphatic drainage. So it helps to soften the scar tissue over time. Um, so yeah, I see between 1 and 3 months of using castor oil 3 or 4 times a week on a scar really significantly reduces the size, um, the feeling of it, and also the physical appearance of it too. I mean, it's, for some people that's the more significant part. For me, I'm always looking at the nervous system, so I'm more interested in how it's affecting the body's ability to do what it needs to do versus the appearance. But the castor oil also does reduce the appearance of the physical scar.
So now I understand what you mean by form a pack. Can you explain what that would look like?
Yeah, so I don't personally do this myself, so I don't feel like I can recommend it to people, because it, let's
Tell
just
them,
say,
but let me hear you try.
yeah. So so what you do is you take a piece of flannel cloth, or cotton or whatever you have. They sell castor oil kits at health food stores and things like that too, online on Amazon. But you can, not that I want to plug Amazon right now, but basically you just soak this flannel cloth in castor oil, and I mean soak it so that it's not so that it's dripping, but it's so that it's holding the oil. It's not just dabbed on there, and then you place it over the scar. I mean, commonly people use castor oil packs over the liver or over the uterus for menstrual cramps and menstrual complaints. But one of the more common places is over the liver. I guess that's the liver has a lot of jobs. It metabolizes hormones, clears out histamine. It's responsible for conjugating or detoxifying hormones. So I guess the liver is one place you can use a castor oil pack, but you can use a pack anywhere. So basically, you put the pack over that piece of skin, liver, where the scar is, over the abdomen, and then wrap it with Saran wrap, and then so that kind of keeps the oil contained. And then you can put a heating pack over that Saran wrap, and then the heat allows the castor oil to diffuse deeper into the tissues. So if you want to go deep, I guess with castor oil, then the pack, it definitely does work better. I just don't have the patience or the.
Yeah, I've done that for my children. I've done it when they were having asthma attacks, and it would help them be able to breathe more.
Yeah.
And so you're putting the pack. I used 100% cotton because I had a lot of old clothes that were of that material, and I just cut it up to the size I wanted it to be. And so I'd put that, I'd soak that, put that on, and then the Saran wrap on top. So I'm not surrounding that completely. I'm just protecting my heating pad from
Right.
my cloth. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, and I didn't mean to surround the castor oil. I meant like surround the body, I guess. Like Saran wrap
Oh, so you've
castor oil
actually
to the
heard
body.
me wrap the entire body in the Saran wrap.
Yeah, just so it keeps it in place. You don't have to hold it. I guess if you're laying down, but I
Uh-huh.
mean, putting it over the liver, it'll slide off for sure, or it
True,
can.
true. Yeah.
So yeah, to kind of keep it in place, that's a good point. Yeah, you do want the cloth with the castor oil on it in contact with the skin because that oil is diffusing through, as far as we know, and having its effects that way. So that's awesome that you found that helped with breathing. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. You're the doctor of, anyway, the Southwest Naturopath Medical Center. He used to be my doctor, and that was what he suggested to me. So beautiful. Well, I hope that really opens our audience eyes to what they can do to help their body get less physical stress, whether, I mean, even on a regular basis, taking care of their liver so that they can handle things more, or the scars. There's different things that you can do. And it's very, very economical to. So now I want to dive into, talk to us about kinesiology, applied kinesiology, and why that works and what that is and how that helps you with the way that you practice.
Yeah, so I guess applied kinesiology, another word for it is muscle testing. I don't like to use that word as much because I think there's a negative connotation. But anyway, it's a form of biofeedback, basically, is the way that I see it. And so we can kind of open up a dialogue with the body and ask it. I guess with the nervous system specifically is how we're using it. But we're opening up a dialogue with the body to ask it what its priorities are, which organ systems are under the most stress. We can use muscle testing to basically ask questions about any therapy that we might apply to the patient. So like you said, we do have a lot of tools in as human beings and physical bodies, and with technology, we have a lot of different options to treat things. So sometimes it is the best for somebody to take a pharmaceutical medication because it's so concentrated and it's such a strong piece of input to the body, and it kind of like it can force the body to work a certain way in that time. Anyway, but sometimes it's something more gentle like castor oil or like some kind of nutrition is more appropriate. But the cool thing about muscle testing is that we can also ask the body if the emotions are what's affecting that organ system and putting it under stress. So for example, like, since we're talking about um, the liver in Chinese medicine is basically it's an organ that can be stressed out by feelings like anger, resentment, irrationality, aggression, frustration. So the liver gallbladder, the wood element, is sensitive to those kind of emotional states. And so if there's an event that triggered those type of emotions that are being triggered on a regular basis, then that can wear down the liver's ability to do what it does. And so it's not to say that if you are angry or resentful, or if you're sensitive to those emotions from other people, that it can work that way too if you're empathetic. And so it doesn't mean to say that if you're feeling those things, your liver is going to be damaged. But what it does mean is that your liver is going to have, like, it's kind of like drains your liver battery, your liver's energy, because you're trying to, yeah, your body's trying to reconcile those emotions. And yeah, so that's kind of the link between Chinese medicine and what we do. And we use muscle testing to figure out which organ systems are under stress, and if it is indeed if there is an emotional stressor. That
I have a little story to talk about the liver. So when I lived in Texas and was living downwind from a hazardous plant waste, well, it was a cement plant that burned hazardous waste from the United States. And so my liver was being very much taxed. And I had so much suppressed anger. I was angry all the time. I could handle it until I exploded. And anyway, that was what it was. But as I healed my liver, I just stopped being angry. I wasn't having to repress the anger. It was just gone. And it was just so fascinating to see that within myself. And yeah, so that's a little story that I have. I thought of
so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. Now, with the applied kinesiology, why does that work? And I have in my mind two ways of why it works, but I'd love to hear your why does this even work, that a muscle would get weak or whatever when you're asking your body questions?
Yeah, so I guess if we take it back to the bandwidth example, if we apply a stress to the body, or we ask the body to do something and it can't handle that, or if there's enough interference or enough stress created in the nervous system by us through us applying that stimulus, then it can blow out the nervous system and change the strength of a muscle. So we're not necessarily talking about like a muscle totally turning off when we're talking about muscle testing. We're talking about like a 4 out of 5 in strength and that muscle being off or weak, quote unquote weak, versus like a 5 out of 5. So it's just that it doesn't lock. So for example, if somebody thinks about something that's significantly stressful, that pulls resources, because I guess energy goes where attention flows. Energy flows where attention goes. Anyway, so if somebody thinks about something stressful, their body's resources are mobilized towards dealing with that. And then you just have less bandwidth in that moment to deal with everything else that's going on. We can also apply this to adjusting bones too. I mean, if we push on a bone or touch a bone, we're bringing the body's attention to that area. And if there's enough issue there, then it can blow out the nervous system basically temporarily. And then a muscle that we're using as an indicator for the nervous system's ability to handle that stress will turn off or go weak, I guess is another word for it. And maybe some of you have seen that before, where somebody's testing a muscle, just like a straight arm pull down test, and somebody's asked to think about something, or they touch a certain point on the body, and that arm, the strength in the muscle changes. It's kind of, we're just bringing the body's attention to different things in different areas. And if those are significantly under stress, then it's going to cause a change in the muscle. So it's basically a form of biofeedback. It's kind of like a stethoscope or an X-ray machine or a lab test, and then it's a tool to gain information. So it's not the only way we can get information about the body, but it's one way that we can. This form of biofeedback is one way we can ask or figure out what's going on with people.
Yeah, no, I I look at it as we are electrical beings, and this is like a short in the electrical system when.
Short, exactly, yeah. That's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, and then I look at it another way as well, that our spirit inside of us is strengthened by truth, because you can do this with just your name and feel what your muscle is strong to just what your name is, and then you make up a name and then your muscle will go weak. And it will show how when you are in truth, you will physically be more strong.
I
So
like
it's
that. Beautiful. Yeah.
kind of interesting that way. But you can totally muscle through, you know, also. It's like, you're not going to push my arm down. I mean, yeah.
There is that for sure. As I do this more and more, there aren't very many people that I can't test, because it can be more subtle when people have a lot of when they're really well trained athletes and they're able to respond to more subtle types of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a difference in the strength for sure. Like they'll lock solid on, yeah, my name is John, and then they'll say my name is Sarah, and then it's not like it's going to totally give out, but there's going to be a twitch or something that'll let you know that.
Yeah.
So it depends on how people's physiology works, but most people are pretty easy to test that way. And I think you can even test yourself, like you were saying.
Yeah. No, there's been times that I have held food and it'll literally, I'll just say, stand with soft knees. And for me, it'll push me backwards. I have figured out what a yes for me looks like and what a no looks like. So, like, if I sit and hold sugar, I will go backwards. And, but like if I have brown rice, I will either stand strong or maybe even pull forward if my body really wants me to have brown rice right now. Um, so it's just, there's many ways to get information in that and learn what to do it for yourself. So it's fun to put it in like a paper bag so you can't see what you're testing, so your mind doesn't know, but then your body just does it.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but having a clear mind while having a clear statement, you know, this is 100% healthy for me right now, you know, and
Yeah,
so,
it's interesting. The body doesn't tend to lie, but if you don't ask the right question and you interpret the answer in a way that it can be tricky, it can fool you. So I think you're right when it comes to intention and not being attached to the outcome. I think is a big deal when you're doing muscle testing, because I think like our minds do change the physical environment around us. So I
yeah,
think that's
having a clear mind and a clear question or statement is
yeah,
important. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So tell me how you use this with taking care of emotions for your patients.
Yeah, so so we can use muscle testing. Basically, we'll just test an indicator muscle. So, for example, with the liver, we found that it's correlated with the pec major sternal, like one of the chest muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So say the liver comes up as being under stress, we find that pec major sternal is turned off. It's weak, so to speak. We can ask the body if it's an emotional stress or if there's an emotional stress contributing to that liver stress by asking people to touch their forehead. These are, I guess this is something people intuitively do when they're under stress. They'll like hold their head in their hands. And it's because these points are significant in processing emotional stress. So it's interesting how we do this, and we have these kind of sayings in our culture that have truth to them. But anyway, we ask the body basically if this turns on that pec major sternal, that liver muscle, then we know that there is an emotional component to that liver stress. So that's kind of like our body entry way of figuring out that there's an emotional stress. Also, if we can just ask somebody to think about something that's stressful to them and test any muscle, and it'll go weak if it's a significant enough stressor. So there's two ways we can figure out what the emotional stressor is. And then once we figure out what that emotional stressor is via muscle testing, we figure out which meridian it's related to if we didn't use the body entry type thing. And then so liver will say, say it's frustration. Then we know which point we need to use to clear it. And then the other cool thing we can do is we can ask if there was an original event that kind of set people up for the situation they're in currently. So, I mean, a lot of things happen to us when we're younger or in earlier stages of development, or we just didn't know then what we know now, kind of situations where we, yeah, we can't handle that stress. And something like, I don't know, if somebody kicks over your block castle when you're 2 and you spent like 30 minutes building it or whatever, it might be really traumatic, as opposed to like now, like you'd probably respond to that differently as an adult. But that emotion can still be in the background waiting to be triggered. Like you worked hard on something and then somebody doesn't appreciate it, or they, even worse, they destroy it or whatever it is. That's still going to bring up that same emotion that was created. I mean, we don't necessarily have to respond in emotional ways to things, but these complexes, these emotional states, it's like, yeah, it's like somebody does that, they destroy what you built, and then it brings you back to that 2-year-old state of development. So you have those tools to deal with it because that was what you physiologically had available. And so this is problematic because you can't necessarily respond to that person in a healthy or collaborative or even defensive way. You might just totally short circuit because you're back to being that 2-year-old who, when somebody kicked over your castle. So anyway, so sometimes it's useful to find that original event where people like went through that feeling and they just didn't have what they needed to process it. They didn't have the, or there was too much emotion, there was too much stress. So we can go back to those times, and then we can basically just use the acupuncture meridians to allow the body to process that event energetically, so that it doesn't have to trigger that same emotional response or pull people back to that earlier developmental stage when they're triggered by that situation.
What are the topics that you ask about? Like, you know, I've heard you do this with me all the times, but do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I guess generally there are 3 things that stress people out in life. This is from NET, I guess, emotional technique. But generally, I think they're good enough categories. Like there's all the material things in life: money, job, career, finance. There's love, so everyone that's ever loved you, everyone you've ever loved. And then there's all the different roles that you play in your life. So you, the mom, you, the daughter, you, the member of society, you, the woman, you, the physical being, you, the emotional being, spiritual being. So we can figure out which category that emotion is related to.
Now,
And
you
then,
always have to add an extra one for me, though. Taking
yeah,
on other people's stuff.
yeah, exactly. Well, and then once we find the emotion, I think we sometimes do need to go deeper. Like, is there a contract that this person has set up, or is there an ancestral piece, or, I mean, heaven forbid, there's an entity attachment. These things are common enough that I think they're worth looking into. Um, so that's usually, we do usually have to go deeper for you for whatever reason. I think empathetic people, like some people are here to kind of reconcile some of their family or their bloodlines past issues, and I don't know why that is exactly, or why we would have to do that here, but it comes up. So, and it helps people to be able to work through that stuff. So does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. And that gives people categories to hear. And if you know how to muscle test, you can muscle test those categories and figure out which one it is, and then do a process to release it, whether that process is prayer or writing or doing some sort of other thing that you say, when I choose to do this, I will release that. And that action and agency makes a difference with the release.
It does, yeah. And sometimes people don't realize they're even reacting to things. And so I
Yeah.
think the value in asking these questions is being able to pinpoint it. And then, yeah, so say, if every time, yeah, say you're feeling more frustrated than you want to be for whatever reason, or you feel like you're more like scared or whatever it is. If that's like a common theme, but you don't know exactly what the trigger is, sometimes asking these questions can get to the root of it. And then, like you said, if you know what the trigger is, then you can consciously be aware of that emotional response you're having. There's power in that because you can change it, as long as you can recognize it, not just let it take you. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, learning to recognize for sure. Yeah, no, I know that our physical bodies need specific things. You know, and you do have given me lots of nutrition before, and we've done a little bit of pharmaceutical things, but I love how you do, you know, the biochemically and the structurally and the mental and emotional, and it's just a nice package from a medical doctor, you know. I appreciate the service that you give to your patients. So I can't believe our time is up. I would like you to talk about what you have for your free gift. I looked at it and I think it's a very nice, beautiful summary of many things that could be done to help people.
I wrote this a little while ago, so I don't know exactly what's in it, but I know we talk a little bit about things that you like, I know we talk about interference and little people.
The interference field is in there, and the chemical criminals are in there, and you
Yeah,
list those out, and how to you said it nourishment, but there's how to nourish your body in very
yeah.
simple, economical ways and why those ways work. I loved how you explained it. And then calibrating for healing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess stuff isn't all that fancy, but like you said, like hydration is a big deal. I mean, if our bodies are dehydrated, then the chemical processes that happen in our cells, they're just not as snappy. They're not as there's it just doesn't like things don't get cleared as the waste doesn't get cleared out as easily. So like hydration is nothing else works as well without hydration. Breath is the same way. Actually, breath's more important. I mean, try holding your breath for 44 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Like that gets really hard. I mean, you can go 10 minutes without water or food easily, more like 30 to 45 days without food. So I think working on these basic things like hydration, breath, and I can't sleep is really important too because it seems like people do better when they do sleep, and like a lot of suffering is caused by not enough sleep or lack of sleep. That I think it's significant enough. So basically, I wrote that book to kind of cover some of the bases, like some of those basic bases that if people have these things in place, like a lot, sometimes their issues go away. I mean, I had one patient come in, they came in for a free consult, and I said, you got to switch your water, drink enough water. And then, yeah, he came back for his initial exam, and all of his, like most of his problems were, all of his problems were like 90% better.
It's amazing. Well, and not to, I don't mean to interject so much, but for me, with you teaching me how important the water intake is, I know I need to have at least 2 liters a day, and then a liter of electrolytes on top of that for my body to handle what I need. And I'm not that big of a lady, and I know that, so that might be more anyway, but than most people get. But when I've been doing this summit, the amount of stress that I'm under, what I do is I have my water bottle, it's always by me, and I take a drink, and so I feel the stress. I'm like, drink water. And so stress, drink water, and I see the stress being filtering out of my body. As I feel that water go down my throat, I imagine stress is releasing away. And and like with sleep, the times that I haven't been able to stop my mind because I'm thinking, I'll be like, okay, well, my mind's thinking about the summit. I'm going to sit and think about gratitude, and that I'm thankful that God is supporting me and that I'm choosing to be brave to serve. And so I just make that into a mantra, and think about that while I'm relaxing my body. And I may not go to sleep, but I am awakening refreshed because I'm in gratitude and at least relaxing my body. And sometime during that, I do fall asleep. But it's really interesting how we can control our minds and have it be, it can make a change for us so that we can get the sleep, so we can get the water, so we can have our bodies function better.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I think all, like I said, all this stuff adds up. And so if you do these little small, I mean, yeah, it seems like it's not very big deal, but you know, like all these little things add up, and then your body works more the way it was designed to if you reduce those
yeah, and what I think what we found with me is I was trying to self-punish myself by not drinking water. It's like I knew I should drink water, but I could not get myself to drink water. And it's because there was something I felt like I needed to be punished about. And by clearing that out, now I can easily, now it doesn't drive me crazy of, oh, I got to drink more water. Just like, oh, drink water. That might sound really strange, but it's just like, I had this program that I needed to be punished for whatever reason, you know?
So all those things can change. Yeah, the way that you currently think doesn't necessarily have to be the way that you think. And I mean, sometimes these things are good. Sometimes they're letting us know that there are deeper things we need to address. But sometimes they're just weird programs that we get that we don't necessarily want or need or consciously, because we're not consciously aware of them. We don't necessarily think we can change them, but people are a lot stronger and more adaptable than they think. So yeah, so that's why I wrote that book. There's some basic stuff in there to help people to get started on feeling better.
Yes, well, thank you so much. I hope people choose to opt into that and give their email so that they can receive that from you.
Right.
Well, we will end. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we end?
No, I think I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, thanks again for putting this together.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And I want to thank everyone for being with us today, and hope you have the most lovely day. Make it be filled with peace and maybe even a little bit of laughter.